Marietje Schaake, you're a member of the European Parliament for D66. Welcome. I would like to discuss with you a couple of issues which I think this evening is going to be about, and it will be interesting to hear from you what your point of view are for the rest of the debate later tonight. Let's start with this age of anxiety. It seems that people are very anxious about the things which are happening worldwide, but also within for instance, the Netherlands or Western Europe. And they seem to be very insecure, therefore, because of all this anxiety. Could you name a couple of important reasons why people could feel insecure nowadays in the world we're living in at the moment?
Yes. Well, in the conversations I have with people that I meet throughout my work, both in the Netherlands, in Europe and outside, I think we all observe a lot of rapidly changing trends that are of a big scale. Mm-hmm. So there's an economic crisis, of course, which we don't know where the end will be. We see climate change, we see demographic developments at a very rapid pace, technological developments at a very rapid pace, and it's hard to keep the overview and to understand how you can keep a sense of control and ownership of your own surroundings. A lot of these massive global developments have an impact on the individual's life, on citizens' lives, but it's hard for them to control these very big flows and developments. And I think that can create a sense of unbalance or uncertainty.
And you mentioned all kinds of developments which contribute to this feeling of insecurity. Is there one main driver, or is it the economy? Is it technology? Is it a combination of all these developments in one spot as we are?
Well, I think it's on the one hand these big trends, and it's a combination between the two because they also affect each other in a significant way. But when we look, for example, at democracies and the institutions that usually provide some sort of guidance or structure in our societies, we also see that from the bottom up, people feel empowered and they form ad hoc coalitions which sometimes actually put into question the legitimacy and the authority of these institutions. So, for example, when we look at analysis of the economic crisis, there are a lot of people who don't really care if an economic expert or academic with years of experience has a model that shows that the solution should lie in a certain direction, because if they feel that the solution should lie elsewhere, then that is what they're going to go with. So I think the tension between the institutions that were providing some sort of structure and security in societies and the empowerment of individuals, we see real challenges even in our own democracies, not only in North Africa or the Middle East, where there's a lot of serious changes going on, also close to home. And although it seems relatively easy to say how things should not be or what is wrong with the existing system, I don't see a lot of viable alternatives. So I think people are very eager to demonstrate, to be critical, and I think they have every right to. Mm-hmm. But what I would hope is that there will be an opening up from the top, reaching out to sort of this citizen-led network, or these horizontal structures rather, and that together we can reform the democratic system to provide more anchors for people.
Okay, so you believe in that the institutions do play a role in trying to reach out and to make these connections. Why do you say this? Because you see that individuals, because of the insecurity and the anxiety, how are they behaving because of this insecurity? How do you see people responding to this almost impotent feeling of, am I able to do anything?
Well, sometimes I think they're not doing enough. When I look at students, for example, the younger generation throughout Europe, a lot of them are unemployed, and many of them face a serious heritage of an economic problem that they didn't create. And I think oftentimes people are creative to find a solution in their own life, but they don't necessarily address the bigger problems. And I wish that young people would speak out more. On the other hand, I do see people online connecting behind different causes and in that way bridging distances between themselves and others behind certain causes. So some of them do find coalitions even worldwide to address environmental challenges or freedom of speech issues or other causes that they believe in. And yet another trend, and I think we see a lot of this in the Netherlands at the moment, is to become more nationalist, to try to find a more definable and familiar space to identify with, and that translates into sort of nationalist, protectionist tendencies.
Let's have a look at these tendencies, because I think they're particularly interesting. Because you say one of the responses we have is trying to connect again to this national identity. Is this the Sicherheit that people are talking about, and which Freud has mentioned as, on the one hand, there is, well, the searching for freedom, but on the other hand, people are, especially in anxiety, in anxious times, are looking for assurance, safety, etc., etc. Is that a trend that you see now?
Well, I think people are looking for this kind of certainty, but they do not trust the state to provide it, or they do not trust the existing institutions to provide it. And perhaps this is more an expression of a lack of opportunity, because if you feel like you have an opportunity and a room and a way to take ownership of your own life, then you don't have to feel so overwhelmed by these global developments. But if you feel like there's a lot happening, there's not much you can do, you want certainty, but the state is not providing it, and in fact the people who are claiming to provide it you can't trust anymore, or you don't believe in anymore, or you don't think are legitimately telling you or the country how things should be, there's a paradox there. So I think we must look at how we can empower people to take ownership and responsibility of their own lives, and that way, hopefully, they can themselves take responsibility for their own certainty and freedom at the same time.
But what's so interesting is that you say, okay, let's empower people, but what's the biggest paradox, I think, of all, is that you mentioned there is all kinds of technology we can use nowadays. We don't trust the institution anymore, but should we trust the institution because we are better and better educated? So all these tools of empowerment, being educated, having this technology, I mean, we can nowadays organize our own lives, can't we? So how do you relate this to these increasing possibilities, and on the other hand, this search for Sicherheit?
Well, whether people really experience a sense of expanding possibilities is the question. I think there's a lack of investing in education that's really accessible for everyone and that actually prepares you for the job market, because there is a challenge at the job market. So a lot of people don't think that their education is good enough. And I think it should also be better to be more competitive in a global economy. I mean, Europe should really become a more deeply focused knowledge economy, instead of accepting that we have good education, but globally speaking, we're losing position compared to other players. So I don't know if we are at the point yet where we should be. Some people may well be empowered through the use of these technologies or being connected with others, but there's of course a big group of people who are not at all maneuvering in these networks or feeling connected.
The tools are there, but the tools are not used yet. Is that one of the main issues then when you...
I think that's one issue, but I think there's also a sense of exclusion that people experience. Exclusion from the circles of decision making, of closed systems, sort of old boys networks, which applies to a younger generation, that doesn't always have a voice or an influence on the decisions that are being made. But it applies to people, of course, when they're outside of the job market, when they don't feel like they have the skills or the abilities to take ownership of their own destinies. And I think that segregation, I guess, or living in kind of closed communities or worlds that people experience is going to present a challenge, combined with the fact that people do not necessarily accept the legitimacy of the authorities, which are supposed to manage our societies.
And while you're saying this, does it also then means that our freedom is decreasing, our level of freedom or our feeling of freedom, because of these phenomena that you just explained?
I think people feel that in the street or in their daily lives, when there's less job security, or when they think that their life is more uncertain, they can experience a sense of anxiety, as you called it, or uncertainty, while legally speaking, on paper, their rights and their freedoms may well be as guaranteed as they always have been. But if they don't experience it, if they don't feel it, then perception becomes truth at some point. And in a lot of European countries, not in the Netherlands, thankfully, but in Greece, in Spain, there have been much more strong confrontations between people who went in the street to demonstrate against budget cuts, for example, and the police. So these tensions can actually be magnified if things get worse. And it doesn't mean that the laws change or the freedoms actually change, but it means that the feelings that people have of uncertainty become actions and can have an impact.
Let's lastly have a look at this perception, because I think that's interesting to wind up with. Is there a way to change this perception so maybe factual human rights or freedom is not that endangered at all, or maybe the perception of it, but I mean the factual rights are there? What tools do we have, or which solutions do you see to change this perception, which people seem to have in their head and increasingly are voicing and are using their democratic vote for?
Yeah, well, there's not one magic solution, but one thing I believe we should at least try is to open up these institutions, which are indeed often very closed off, sort of, networks that have been or institutions that have been organized the same way for a long, long time, and people don't really know what's going on inside of them. Yeah. Governments have become kind of closed off, whether they're local or national or European. And I think if we can open up these institutions, which, after all, should serve the people, and make more information available about what the government is doing, what these institutions are doing, and using new technologies and transparency to also involve people in the decision making. We see small examples on a local scale where municipalities, the local governments, are including people in spending the budget on about 30% of the annual budget. So citizens can come together and decide where they want to invest in their local community. I think that's a way to involve people. To give them an insight also that it's not so easy to run a city or to run a country, but also to give them a voice in how their budget, their public funds are being spent. And so if we open up institutions that are historically closed off and actually reach out to people and involve them in the decision making, then perhaps that can give a sense of inclusion, a sense of a voice and impact on the outcome. And it's a democratizing or a democratic process that increases transparency and involvement. So that would be a way which could start at the local level to change this.
Okay. Thanks so much for your contribution. Let's see what other guests think of tonight. But it's a great start for a discussion. Thanks so much.
Thanks.